Hi, everybody, and welcome to the ALC Changemakers podcast. I'm your host, Jennifer Sconyers, and I'm here today with Carol Kauffman. Welcome, Carol.
Hi, so glad to be here.
It's so glad to have you. So, for listeners, I've known Carol, and I'm trying to think. I think we might have first met in 2012. I think that might have been
Yes.
it. When we were both working with an organizing entity here called the Ohio Organizing Collaborative. I think you were maybe doing faith-based work. I had just started brand new as a comms director, and we met then, and then we found our way back in orbit together, if you will, with the Ohio Environmental Council, and that is where you currently are as their executive director.
That's right. Yes. We reconnected when I was on the board of the OEC, and
Yeah.
you were on the board as well.
Yeah.
And I remember walking into the room and just being delighted to see a familiar face at the table.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, there's Jennifer. Everything's going to be fine. This is going to be great.
Awesome, awesome. Well, Carol's now the ED of the OEC, and so she's here to really talk about her leadership journey and also what this amazing organization does in the world and its importance today. So, Carol, tell us a bit about yourself and your leadership journey.
Yes. All right. And you're going to have to cut me off because I like to talk about this. So I'll try not to go too long-winded. So I was spending some time reflecting on, my leadership journey, and really it was a long time. It was a slow burn because for a long time I kind of believed, oh, maybe leadership isn't for me. And I had only had exposure to certain kinds of models of leadership that I didn't find really resonated for who I am. Um, I thought, well, I'm introverted. I can't be a leader, or, I don't really enjoy a certain kind of style. But then I was in my grad program from 2010 to 2012, so just before you and I met. And one of the required courses I had to take was a leadership course, and it was taught by a person named Dr. Beth Birmingham. And I showed up just like, I'm not going to like this. And right away, she convinced me, and she just pulled me into a completely different understanding of leadership and really focused that course around servant leadership. And I had to read lots of good source data and materials that really helped me understand that leadership is a discipline, it's not a personality trait, and that you can lead in a way that aligns to your values. And in fact, that's how you can be most effective. So, really, since that point in my life, I've been pursuing leadership opportunities as they've come up. And as you said, I'm now leading the Ohio Environmental Council for the past couple of years. And I've really enjoyed that and applying, thanks, Dr. Beth, I apply a lot of the things that I learned still today for sure.
That's wonderful. And can you name for listeners what brought you to environmental work? Because I knew you in a whole different context, and I think we met right before you went to Cambodia, right? So
Mhm.
Carol's worked internationally as well. So yeah, what was kind of the journey that brought you to the OEC?
Oh, good question. So, as you noted, my entire career really hasn't been spent in the environmental space, but when I was working in international development and humanitarian response, a lot of the work that I did was focused on connecting people to basic resources like safe water. And I really came into the environmental space from a perspective of, um, human flourishing, public health, equality of access, water as a human right really was how I entered into this space. And then while I was working and living in Cambodia, that country is really ground zero for the effects of a changing climate. So you've got folks who are seeing a change in the traditional seasons that they've relied on to know how to run their family farms. You're seeing flooding that's devastating communities in ways that they just haven't been able to adapt to yet, and a lot of impacts from deforestation that make the heat effect for folks really intensified, and has caused widespread, biodiversity loss. And it's a justice issue as much as it is a nature problem. I really saw there, like, we are part of nature. We are not separated. And when human beings and nature are suffering, it all comes together. It's one big challenge. So that was really what drove me when I came back to living in Ohio in 2017. I knew that I wanted to continue to pursue environmental justice and the environmental challenges of our planet in my home state. And that's really what led me to the OEC. As I said, I joined the board not long after I moved back to Ohio.
Yeah, and I want to name that I think that there's there's so many unique perspectives that I think that you bring to the organization. So the organization's over 50 years old. I think the 50th anniversary was 2019. So for listeners, I'm actually on the OEC's board, currently serving as board president. So I get to work closely with Carol. And the organization has just gone through many twists and changes over the years, right? And so can you speak to kind of who and what the organization is
Mhm.
today and really kind of like some of the big fights and some of the issues that you all are working on right now?
Sure. Yeah, we're 56 years old. I like to say we were formed before the US EPA and the Ohio EPA. And I'm really proud of this legacy that I now get to steward along with you and all of the other folks on our staff and board. We were started by a group of concerned Ohioans who it was the late 60s and they were seeing environmental degradation happening all around them and decided we're going to do something about this together. And so that's really where we've come from. We've been, along the journey in this state and in this nation, we've been there every step of the way for things like the Clean Water Act and the Clean Air Act and protection of our public lands, et cetera. So we continue that tradition today. I think some of the things that are maybe new-ish in our history include a focus on clean energy and not just clean and modern technology, getting that on the grid and working in our state, but making sure that our state is making this energy transition in a way that is beneficial to all Ohioans and that, regardless of your zip code or your income level, you're able to afford your energy bill and you have the opportunity to access clean energy and the benefits of reducing climate pollution and air pollution. So that's a relatively, I would say, not brand new, but certainly a new emphasis for us in the past decade as the energy transition has gotten underway and a lot of renewed focus on climate change has happened. We also continue to work on water issues from source to tap. One thing that we are really engaged in right now is protecting people from lead exposure in their drinking water. I'm sure your listeners have, heard of places like Flint, Michigan, that have had really devastating water impacts, water quality impacts over the last few years. In Ohio, we had a water quality issue in 2014 in Toledo when harmful algal bloom infiltrated the city's water supply. But on an ongoing, everyday basis, Ohio has some of the highest levels of lead service lines connected to people's homes and places of business and schools of anywhere in the nation. And so we're now seeing through years of hard work, a lot of support, across party lines, across all kinds of communities to say, we've got to prioritize getting the lead out of people's drinking water. So that's a current fight that I'm really excited about. And also on energy, we've seen some really good common sense energy policy get passed earlier this year that's going to be really good for people's pocketbooks, but also, create more of a level playing field for all kinds of clean energy projects that can get built in the state, which I think is, of course, it's good for the environment, but it's also good for local communities and, getting investment into local communities that need it. So those are just a couple of the things. We're also continuing to fight for our public lands. Ohio has the Wayne National Forest. It's not too far from where I live. I love to go into that region of the state and just connect with nature, and that is constantly under threat from drilling, clear cutting, all kinds of things that would negatively impact this precious resource in our state. So we continue to fight very hard to protect it.
It's wonderful. Thank you for laying that out, Carol. And for listeners, there's just, I want to say, I don't want to call it a one-stop shop for the environment, but the OAC touches so many issue areas. So I think depending on what people's interests are. I know when I joined the board, so for listeners, I joined the board in 2017. And if you would have talked to me then, I would not have considered myself an environmentalist. Instead, I saw myself as someone who cared about environmental justice, how it intersects with health and the environment and workers and people. Like that was how I really saw myself. And I remember at the time thinking, well, is there a place for me? Because everybody here at that time, they had PhDs in some version of environmental science, or they had their medical degrees, and or they worked for the Ohio EPA or the US EPA. And at the time, I remember thinking, I'm not that person. How could I be here? But I want to name that over the years, that's really evolved, right? That the board has evolved to people across the state, different backgrounds who have genuine interest and values alignment with some issues you outlined. Can you speak a little bit about what's needed in this moment? There's so much happening politically in the greater space, and there's such an impact to the issues that you've laid out.
Mm. Well, I felt the same way when I joined the board that you did. I was smiling as you shared that anecdote because I remember, coming to my first board meeting and having people introduce themselves around the room and just being really amazed at the incredible brain trust that was there and thinking, do I fit? Like like you, I sort of came in through maybe a slightly different pathway into the work. But pretty quickly I realized, we were there for a reason. And the organization knew that it needed a diversity of thought and backgrounds on the board. And I give them a lot of credit, my predecessor, Heather, a lot of credit for recognizing that and prioritizing getting a more diverse set of experiences and perspectives into the organization. Um, so similarly, right now, if I could wave a magic wand, it would be no matter who you are, no matter where you live, no matter what you think you bring to the table, you are needed. This is not an exclusive club. I do not want people to think I can only get involved with an organization like the OEC if I drive a Prius or compost or live in a certain place or like the color green. You can get involved. We need people to step up, and also the way that you can take action is going to look different for each person, and it doesn't mean it's invalid. So I've been really heartened to hear, stories of people getting civically engaged, and anywhere from someone who's in a retirement facility, writing postcards to young children, creating a lemonade stand and raising money for an organization that supports immigrants in their community. There's so many ways to get involved and to make a difference. And it really does help us to kind of overcome this feeling of maybe hopelessness or overwhelm, which is one of the reasons it's really important to overcome that, because when we're talking about the environment or climate, it just feels so big, but it is not something that is immovable. We just need to get involved, and like then we'll start to see a lot more momentum.
Absolutely. And I wonder, Carol, for people, again, they wouldn't call themselves an environmentalist. Like, what would be, I don't know, what would be an easy, approachable place to start? Like, what would you recommend people? Like, I'm curious, I want to learn more, but I don't know if I have time or whatever the reasons, what would be a place to start?
Yeah, well, I'll tell you what I tell my friends who ask me that. I have some friends that are really, diehard greenies and others that are not. First of all, vote. Make sure you're registered to vote and educate yourself. Vote in every election. I know it doesn't always seem as exciting to vote, in a May primary, but making sure that you're exercising your voice in your community, whether it's voting on a ballot initiative that will do things like expand public transportation or reform zoning laws to allow for more dense environmentally friendly cities, or voting for the right city council member who you believe will share your values. I mean, it's really important to be active civically. And then secondly, This is pretty low bar. Like look up organizations that you're interested in and start following them on social media. You could sign up for their newsletter if you like to read occasional newsletters. And I think that also is a great way to make sure that you're feeling confident that you're getting the facts. I know
Mhm.
that's something that we talk a lot about in my family. I
Mhm.
have, older children, and they're trying to figure out, well, is this true? And who do I believe? And what do these stats mean? If you can find an organization or two to learn more about that are trustworthy and just start to follow them and absorb, especially the long form content that they create, you're going to find that you're really getting more educated, and then you can decide on your next steps, whether it's showing up to a local meeting, officially becoming a member, et cetera.
I love that. And I know for you and for the OEC, one of the things we've often talked about is the OEC is data driven, right? So I like to name that, when looking up organizations,
Mhm.
of course, I'm going to put a plug in for OEC because the organization just has a history of um, being like making choices rooted in data and data analysis. And I think that we live in a time where science and data are in dispute. So this is an
Yeah.
organization that has a history of being data driven. So I just want to name that. I know we could probably just keep talking all day, just the two of us. And just for listeners, I've just had the privilege and honor to sit on OEC's board to watch its evolution as just a person in my own leadership, which has been great. And then at ALC, we provided trainings and supports for the organization, but really committed to what the org is doing. So for listeners, do you have like a request or a call to action or a thing you'd like listeners to know or do?
Mm. Well, the first thing I wanted to say is I love this Jewish quote from the Mishnah, which is, "You are not obligated to complete the work, but neither are you free to desist from it."
Mhm.
So, what I hope people take from this is I'm not asking you to solve all of the world's problems. What I am calling you to do is join me in continuing the work. And we do have a website that is chock full of resources. As you said, one of our core values is being science based. And we have a strategic plan goal that is just making sure that people have access to credible resources and education on environmental topics that matter to them. So I guess my call to action would be consider going to our website, becoming a member. For $5 a year, you can be an OEC member. You will get access to membership events and briefings. You can customize based on your interest. If you're interested in a particular part of the state or a particular policy area, whether that's energy, land, democracy, or water, and you can start to get more involved. So that would be my call to action is take one step in the right direction, join us, visit our website at theoec.org, and we would just love to have you join us in the movement.
That's awesome. So for listeners, we'll add the OEC's credentials in our show notes with their website and any other materials that would be important for you to know. And as always, if you have questions about social movement spaces or want to get more involved, you can always go to us at jennifersconyers.com. Well, thank you so much, Carol. This has been great. I'm so glad you joined
Thank
us.
you. This was wonderful. Thank you for having me.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
All right.